As for now, we got 4, and our big story is where we go from here. All season up to this point, these have been the rankings the college football world has used. Again, that changes tonight with the CFP rankings out. If you follow these AP rankings, the Big Ten would have 2 of the top 4, as would the SEC. Illinois and Penn State, of course, are the other 2 Big Ten teams in the top 25. The Illini, theoretically, could still play their way into the top 4, while Penn State, with its 2 losses, is almost certainly out of playoff contention. We'll get into how you guys would rank them in a minute. You're each going to unveil a top 6. But Joshua, what are you most interested in seeing tonight?
A couple of things is how they parse out that actual top 4, because I think there's a pretty good consensus on who should be in the top 4. We all like Tennessee, we all like Ohio State, we all like Michigan, and we all like Georgia. But how they actually rank those teams out, the next 2 in as well. Like, what do you do with a Clemson who's undefeated but hasn't really played a tough schedule? Where does Oregon factor in to this conversation? But I always go back to this one. Who are the resume boosters sitting there at 15 through 25? Who are the teams in the back of the rankings that they use to justify where they put the teams at the top? I'll be very tuned into that.
Yeah, I obviously the top teams, great discussion, but I'm always focused on the team, like you're saying, from about 8 to 15, because there's always a team or two that personally I like, that in the back of your mind you're thinking schedule, that how high can these guys climb? And since they've started the college football playoff, there's only been two teams that were outside the top 10 now that have gotten into the playoffs. Ohio State.
Yes.
Right, Rever?
Yeah, well, I think you should gesture toward him, considering he was one of the stars of that team.
That's right, right. When you guys got in.
Number 16.
And then the next year was Oklahoma. They were in. So no one else, unless you're in the top 10, has gotten into the Final Four. So, that's always exciting to me. How far can those teams climb that are down there in that next echelon?
Yeah, no, that'll be really interesting. And I think you get a sense for this committee each year on the first reveal. What do they value? Boo Corrigan's going to be the new committee chair, so we'll hear from him, and he gives you a sense of what they prioritize. Joshua, you're absolutely right. I mean, the back end is always fascinating. Well, they beat 4 top 25 teams, and then you see 3 of those teams are between 20 and 25. Who determined that those were top
24, and 25?
Who determined those were top 25? Well, we did. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, but look, this is the system.
You brought it up last time we had talked about this too, is it's a very tough spot to be in because you're going to get peppered with questions, and you've got a couple of minutes to really go through the hours upon hours upon hours of meeting that you did, and then the hours of work that probably went into the decision-making process for each individual. So you never really get a good answer of why they actually made the decisions, but you can put the pieces together based off of how they do the rankings.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see Illinois. I know we're going to get into that in a little bit, but that's a team because you never know what can happen. Where are they positioned?
For sure.
How high, and are they within, reaching distance on their initial ranking?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into the Big Ten and where you guys expect them to be. But I do think this part of it is fascinating because are they going by the eye test? Are they going by the metrics? And kind of how do they justify the decisions that they make? All that stuff really is fascinating. And I don't think for one second the committee's going to come under a lot of criticism because it does every year. I mean, that's just kind of the way that this works. I don't think anyone doubts the amount of work that they put in. I think the issue is, and Donardo harps on this.
I think there's one
the
person
time.
that doubts how much work.
Well, I think his point is it's a physically impossible job to do. There's no way that you can be an athletic director and spend the amount of time that you need to spend to really ascertain whether or not Team X is better than Team Y.
For sure.
And then as to whether or not you're qualified and know what you're watching, those are issues as well. Let's get into your top 6. So, Joshua, you start, Wani, you'll follow. How do you think it sorts out from you? How would it sort out from your point of view? That's what we're getting at, right?
Yeah.
Not what you think they're going to do, but what you would do.
Yeah, and I've gone back and forth, and this has actually changed since Nicole and I did ours on Saturday for Tailgate. But after watching Tennessee this week, I think that they are the number 1 team. They've got that win over Alabama, but also what their defense showed me against Kentucky, and that was the biggest question I had of whether they could really get over the hump. They were phenomenal defensively. So I would put Tennessee right there, and it's going to sort itself out because Tennessee and Georgia play. Then I've got Ohio State at number 2, and I think that we all understand what this Ohio State team is right now, and the avalanche of points that they had in the fourth quarter against Penn State. Even though they possessed the ball for 4.5 minutes, it was 128 yards passing, and they averaged 9 yards a carry in the fourth quarter. 28 points is really impressive, and they can just end games like that. Georgia's sitting at number 3, and I think their high end's really high, but their low end has showed us that they can get into a tussle. They had that game against Missouri, which was underwhelming. I believe Kent State as well. They just didn't look that good. And then Michigan is sitting right there, and I think they're a very complete football team. You question their ability to throw it down the football field consistently. The red zone has been a question. They got exposed a little bit on their back end against Michigan State, but they have a true identity. They're a very good football team. Then I've got TCU and Bama sitting on the outside looking in, and that 6th spot between for me was between
Clemson.
Oh, I had Clemson there.
Yeah, you had Clemson there.
And now this is the
Don't
one.
don't be getting out of that Clemson one now, because I got some Clemson stuff right here.
Listen. So that last spot really came down as Bama, Clemson, and Oregon for me in that conversation. And Clemson has checked the boxes, so I think that's what the committee will do, and at this point they're deserving. But you asked a question about Bama and some of the wins that they would have, a close loss to a team that we think could win it all. And then Oregon, their only loss was an early blowout to Georgia, but since then they've racked up a couple of top 15 AP wins. A really good football team. So that is a really interesting question of who they actually put in those last couple slots there, 5 and 6.
Yeah, I have the top 4 teams the same, but in different order. I got Ohio State number 1. And my thinking is, and I've seen all these teams play, okay? So this is just not off of scores or anything. And Ohio State, you know, I mean, I've been on some great teams where we've struggled until the fourth quarter for whatever reason, and then come on and they win. I mean, they've beaten everybody by 2 scores. I mean, let's face it. I have Georgia number 2 just because they did struggle. You mentioned Kent State. You know, they beat Missouri by 4, and that was a ball game to the end. So I respect Georgia, but I think Ohio State is the most complete team right now. And I got them. Then number 3, I did put Tennessee. You know, I don't know. I saw them play Pitt up close. Pitt took them to overtime and could have beat them. I'm giving them number 3 because they beat Alabama. I mean, they only beat Florida by 3 points, you know, 38-35. I mean, they've had some games that could have gone either way at the end, but I gave them credit for beating Alabama. But I do believe that Pitt Panthers could have, you know, they could have beat Tennessee. And,
it always circles back around to the Pitt.
I had to say that. Yeah. And then I got Michigan. You know, Michigan, the big question is, and they have just really been strong. We all know about Michigan. The big thing is, you mentioned, can they throw the ball down the field? We're going to find out once they get to the next couple games here. I think, obviously, Illinois will be a contest for them. Ohio State's going to be. And then I believe that they're one of the best 4 teams in the country right now. My 2 on the outside are different. I've got Oregon at number 5. You know, and I know what happened against Georgia, but let me tell you, since that game, from week 2, they are right behind Ohio State. They've had 5 consecutive games where they've scored 40-some points or more a game. They're leading the Pac-12 in rushing, scoring, all those stats. We're going to find out about this Oregon football team, the 3 teams that they've got left, plus them. They got a chance to play 3 ranked teams and beat 3 ranked teams. So I think they're a dangerous football team. And then I got TCU. They're undefeated. They've beaten 4 ranked teams, as we said already, even though they're, at the time, you got to give them credit. They beat Kansas. It was ranked. So we can laugh at Kansas all we want.
Well, Kansas had the quarterback injury, too. So I think you have to take that one as what it was at the time and not what this Kansas team looks like now. So I'll give you credit on that.
Yeah, so so that would be my 6. And TCU, eye test. I'm going to use the first word of the committee.
Here we go.
Eye test, or I like Oregon. TCU's undefeated, but I don't think they're a top 4 team right now. I'm giving them credit. You said Clemson, coach. I got to come right to Clemson.
Okay, let's do it.
Clemson.
I don't like them either.
You don't like them?
I really don't. You give them credit for checking the boxes, but to me, this is the biggest issue I have with this idea of strength of schedule, and Rever, we've gotten into it, but Clemson will get in to the college football playoff if they win out and they win their conference because they checked every box of what they're supposed to do. They will have also played nobody that is a playoff caliber team. But you look at Ohio State and you look at Michigan, you look at Alabama, you look at Georgia, and you look at Tennessee. They will have played at least one team that is a college football playoff caliber team. And if you lose that game, do you penalize them if it's close and reward a team that played nobody all year long and just ran through their terrible conference?
Okay, TCU's undefeated, Clemson's undefeated. Who are you putting in?
I mean, I would go with TCU because I think it's a much deeper conference.
So would I. You just made my case.
I did.
Why I'm not. Clemson's an outstanding team. Don't get me wrong, Clemson fans.
They're a good team.
But they 6 points they beat Syracuse. 6 points they beat Wake Forest, who Louisville beat by like 40 last week. 6 points they beat Florida State, who's an average football team. God, I just had enough. The Clemson
It hasn't even come out yet.
Coach,
I'm
done with Clemson.
Worked into a lather over this. It'll be interesting to see how the Big 12 is treated in all this, because I happen to think that's a pretty good conference.
I think it's the deepest.
It's
it might not
really
be
good league.
The most top end, but
Absolutely.
top to bottom, I think you get the most competition
game every
out
week
of that league.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And one point, because I looked this up because I knew it was a while. 2017 was the last time a Pac-12 got in, and 2020 was the last time a Big 12 got in. So if we're sitting around as the committee members, you want to give a little bit of love into one of these other conferences.
Do you? Pac-12 is interesting too, right? I mean, you're going to have several teams in this conversation, USC, UCLA. I can already see you rolling your eyes, Joshua, and I hear you, but
I don't know.
I mean, again, if you're Oregon.
The eye test in me says that it's a lot of offenses that can move the football, defenses that are okay, not necessarily great, and I don't think that their physicality is going to match up with some of the physicality they're going to see from teams in other conferences. But that's the eye test. I don't have the metrics to back that up. It's just what I've seen.
I want to ask you guys a couple questions. How realistic do you think it is the Big Ten gets 2 in this year? So just to give you a sense, if there are 2 in the top 4 to begin with, historically about 60% of the teams that appear in that initial top 4 make it to the playoffs. So you're better than a coin flip just by appearing in there based on the history. We know what the schedules are going forward. What do you think the chances are of the Big Ten getting 2 in?
I think it'll be very difficult. I really do. Obviously we know what would have to happen. Michigan would have to win. Both teams would have to win out. But Michigan would be the team if they could win out and win the championship. To me, Ohio State, the only way, it would have to be a close loss. Because they're playing at home now, that might be their only thing. But again, I think you're talking about a one-loss team, and now Oregon could be a one-loss team, right?
Conference champ.
And all of a sudden
TCU
they get
runs
bumped
the table.
out.
Clemson wins their conference. That's where I think the outside factors come into play.
I agree.
And it would still be hard for me to say that if it's a close loss either way. And specifically for Michigan going to Columbus, you lose close in that game, and you're kind of sitting there on the outside looking in. You would have had a win over Illinois, who's a good team. You'd have had the win over Penn State, who probably will only have the losses to Ohio State and Michigan. When it's all said and done, I think you would have built yourself a pretty good resume to say that you are one of the best teams, a close loss to a playoff caliber team, and then a couple other wins over top 25 teams, probably top 15 teams. What do you do with that?
I think the whole thing is we get into so many hypotheticals this time of year,
Absolutely.
right? And so much of it is going to be contingent on what happens to Clemson, what happens to TCU, how close this Georgia-Tennessee game is this weekend. Does Alabama rise back up at some point and make a run here? I mean,
They're playing LSU.
There's so many variables.
Be
None of this happens in a vacuum. No. It's hard, but I mean, again, it wouldn't be unprecedented given what the SEC has done in getting multiple teams in. So those teams are, I think, really good, and it's pretty clear. I think to most of us, they'll probably both appear in the top 4. There's a better than
right, and I think you're going to look who they're going to play too, Rever. Yep. You know what I mean? For Oregon's got Washington at 6-2. They got Utah. It's 12 in the country right now. It's 6-2. Oregon State, their last game of the season is 6-2, and they're ranked. right now. And then they would have USC or UCLA in the championship game. I mean, that's for sure 3 ranked teams that they, so with a 1-loss Oregon, that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yes.
Conference champ, as you just said.
Right.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to keep them out.
I do think Pac-12 and Big 12 really interesting to watch tonight and just get a sense of the degree to which the committee is respecting each one of those leagues. For sure. I promise a little Illinois conversation, so I don't want to leave that behind. It seems to me that Illinois is still very much in this conversation, and that if they win out, they will have a very compelling case because they will have won at Michigan, and then you beat either Michigan or Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. By definition, if you have won out, you would have 2 really good wins. You'd have 1 loss in a somewhat controversial fashion early in the year. And it was so long ago. I think you'd have a lot to hang your hat on.
And I've been outspoken about that loss to Indiana too. I don't think that is indicative of this Illinois team at all. There were a couple of bad breaks in that game, and that's what you get in the game of football. You'd have the win over Michigan, which would be huge because we believe that they're a playoff contender, and then you would have beat probably Ohio State at that point.
Or maybe Michigan. Maybe Michigan beats
again.
Ohio State, and then they end up in the championship.
But you win the Big Ten championship. To me, you beat 2 teams that we think are playoff caliber teams. They beat 2 of the best wins nationally.
Yeah.
I don't know how you cannot say that if they win out that they're in. To me, those are 2 of the best wins that you could have.
Yeah, you mentioned. Let's watch and see where the initial rankings are. This is one that we should all be focused on, because if they do run the table like we're all saying, go back to the first thing I said in the opening. Hey, there's only been 2 teams outside of number 14, Ohio State and OU, that were not in the top 10 initially that made it to the playoffs. So seeing where Illinois is placed, I think could have a lot to do with how high they could climb as a 1-loss team.
Wherever they are placed tonight, it'll be the highest they've ever been placed. They've never been in the college football playoff rankings. It remains really one of the great stories in college football this year. And again, I think we all agree you can't rule it out. I mean, it's back on Big Ten today. The Big Ten East has turned into a 2-team race. Michigan and Ohio State, both perfect on the season to this point. As you are certainly aware, they play the season finale in Columbus, as we already alluded to. Penn State, Maryland still mathematically in the race, but would need minor miracles to actually come out on top. It really does come down here to the head-to-head, guys. It's not inconceivable, I don't think, that one of them could lose before that, especially that week before. Ohio State has Maryland, as we were talking about. Michigan has Illinois, but even if you lose that game, if you were to win the next one, then the head-to-head would come into play and you'd still go as the champion of your division. So it really just comes down to those 2 and who you think is better. So who do you think is better?
I'm an Illinois fan. I mean,
no, in the East.
In the East. I'm sorry. I got to go with Ohio State, and I'll tell you what, it's made me not nervous, but Penn State. When they opened up when Ohio State opened the season against Notre Dame, and they were physical and they ran it for over 150 yards, I mean, I guess I was hoping to see that week after week after week, all right? I mean, that was their whole offseason, is we're going to be physical, and it was all for this Michigan game coming up, right? I mean, that's the toughness, the mentality that Ryan Day said that they didn't have, that they got, and they showed that against Notre Dame in the opener. I guess I would have liked to seen that physicality carry over week after week after week, just like Ohio State's passing game.
Sure.
But on the other side, they did run the ball effectively, almost 100 yards last week against Penn State. And their defense now is starting to come on and make plays for them. In the beginning of the year, I didn't think, we say Ohio State big plays on offense.
Right.
But we were hoping that their defense would be better, would be good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're starting to make plays now to win games for you. I love Michigan. I just don't know if Michigan, in a track meet, in a high-scoring game, can keep up with them. So at this point, I'd probably give Ohio State the little edge.
Let me ask you this, and then obviously, Joshua, interested in hearing what you're saying. The counter to can Michigan keep up with them is can Ohio State deal with the physicality of Michigan's run game?
Keep away.
Right.
Yeah,
so, I mean, how do you see that playing out? Because I feel like we've got a question about each team, right? And we said this yesterday on the show as well. And with Ohio State, it's can they run the ball when they need to run it?
Right.
And with Michigan, for whatever reason, it's can they score touchdowns in the red zone?
Sure.
And can they throw deep?
Yeah, and it was really interesting watching games on Saturday because after the Ohio State win over Penn State, I was sitting there, I'm like, yeah, Michigan might be the better team right now. And then you watch them play against Michigan State, and they have some obvious flaws too. With Ohio State, it's what we mentioned. The run game, can it be there when they really need it? I don't think they blocked very well on the edges against Penn State either. They've been inconsistent just in terms of when they come on. Like, they've made great adjustments at halftime to win games in the second half, but in the beginning of games, and especially in the last two, they felt that resistance and haven't really pushed through it. And then defensively, we saw some big plays that they gave up too. You get into some single coverage and, guys miss a tackle. Those plays can go for a long way. And then on the Michigan side, like you said, the red zone's a question. Do they throw it down the football field? I thought that their secondary showed some weakness as well. But I'm not exactly sure that this idea that Ohio State on the defensive front can't keep up with Michigan and how they want to run the football. Because there's nothing on tape that has showed me that Ohio State cannot stop the run effectively over the span of a game. Yeah. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest matchup there. And then after digging back into the tape, I mentioned at the top of the show, in the fourth quarter, Ohio State ran the ball for 8.7 yards per carry. So can you run it when you need to? Well, they did in the fourth quarter.
Well, it was one 41-yard run, though.
Well, okay. Yeah. It's a 41-yard run that went for a touchdown. They scored 2 touchdowns on run plays. Like, is that not important as we're evaluating can they run the football? And so that's what I keep going back and forth on is this idea of when they got to have it, they have shown us that they can do certain things that they have struggled with. Slight edge to Ohio State, but I think it's as even as it's been in a very long time.
Yeah, I go back just even last week to that Penn State game. 9 minutes to go in the game, and and Penn State has the lead?
Yes.
I mean, you've been there. I mean, lived this. You're on that sideline as a coach and as a player, and you're looking at that scoreboard. It's not a secret. No. You know what I mean? And we are in a dogfight, okay, on the road. I mean, this is and guys. I mean, everybody's looking at everybody in the eyes, and we got to rise up. Ohio State has done that. I mean, that's why I give them the little bit of the edge. They've been there, they've done it, they overcome.
I do think the standard with all these teams is so high. I mean, we picked apart all these other teams that we're going to see in the top 4, right? Right. Because this is the way that it works in college football. You don't beat everyone by 40 points.
Absolutely.
Right? You're on the road against a top 15 team. You're going to be in a battle. And that's
when you want to win a championship, like, if you have flaws, they will be exposed. That's why we talk about these things, is we see these teams as teams that could win it all.
Yeah. Let's go over to the West, and it's also a 2-team race. It feels a little bit more clear-cut. Illinois clearly in the driver's seat. In fact, if they win the next 2, home against Michigan State and Purdue, they will book their first-ever ticket to Indy, regardless of what happens after that. They could lose the next 2, it wouldn't matter. Purdue still absolutely has a shot here, but that loss at Wisconsin was really damaging. So if the Boilers win out, they would head to Indy for the first time. I know you started to answer this a moment ago, so I'll let you start answering it here. It feels like Illinois is a better team, right? It just feels like they are the better team.
You just got me revved up on Tommy DeVito and Illinois. Remember, you keep doing that to me.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez, yeah, but I do, and I'll tell you what. The time that Brett Bielema, I know Brett. I was down at Arkansas with him. I mean, spent some time with him. I know what type of outstanding coach he is. But that time he spent with Bill Belichick in New England, I look at this team and you can see, how about a team that doesn't solid on committing penalties, +7 turnover margin, winning with defense. Defense wins championships. And, we laugh. We know how great their running game is. It's as good as anybody in the country. And then you got a quarterback. I mean, you got to come into the game and say, yes, do we have to stop the run? Absolutely. But I had NFL quarterbacks that couldn't go 20 of 22.
Right.
And Tommy DeVito did it. So give him a little bit of credit.
He deserves a lot of credit.
You know what I mean? They're a balanced team. And, defense, I'm going to come back to it, wins championships. I just like Illinois' team from top to bottom. But, okay, Purdue. Can I say something about Purdue?
You can say whatever. The floor is yours.
I would much rather.
This is Wani hour.
I would much rather drop a game plan to defend Illinois than I would Purdue.
Totally agree.
Purdue drives me crazy. Jeff Brom does a great job. You don't know what's coming. you can look at the computer report and you can get some tendencies on Illinois, run, pass, runs. Purdue, I don't know if you can, because I think Jeff Brom's going to come up with a game plan, and that always drives defensive coaches crazy when a team does something that you haven't practiced, particularly in a big, important game like this.
Yeah, for Purdue, everything's up offensively. They can run anything they want to. We've seen them run powers and counters, and we've seen them just throw the ball all game long. So I agree with you on that. And when they're playing at their high end, I think they're a really difficult team to defend. I also think they're a really difficult defense to go up against because they're very aggressive and they want to challenge throws, but it seems like it has gone the wrong way for them too many times, whereas Illinois feels like a more steady team. Even similarly, their defense wants to get north and south on the defensive lines, and they challenge, seriously, every throw in the back end. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the defensive backs for Illinois like to put their face on guys. They like to hit. They seek contact. And the little skinny guys back there who do all that backpedaling all game long, they don't typically like to put their face on a dude. And so it creates this edge. And then you mentioned all the things they do well offensively. I think it's a really balanced team. I think it's an extremely well-coached team. I think this is a coaching staff that makes adjustments really well. There is a lot for me to like about Illinois coming out of the West.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Look, whoever ends up there is going to be a great scene. They're both easy driving distance.
Yep.
Indy will be the first time that either program is there, whoever it is. But it does feel like Illinois has just been the more dependable team, more consistent team, absolutely. 2 of its final 4 games to wrap up a bowl. 5 teams are already in. Northwestern's already been eliminated. The other 6 are in various degrees of limbo. Purdue and Minnesota figure to get in. Indiana, Nebraska, Michigan State do not. And that leaves us with Iowa, Rutgers, and Wisconsin, who are all at 4-4. So let's go through those 3. Let's start with the Badgers. And there's a lot on the line here, Joshua. They've been to 20 straight bowl games, the longest active streak in the Big Ten. It's the second longest active streak in Big Ten history. You look at these 4 games, and they all feel kind of like varying degrees of toss-ups down the stretch. Do you think that Jim Leonard and the Badgers make it?
Yeah, this is a difficult one for me because I feel like I've seen 2 iterations of this Wisconsin team. It's a Wisconsin team where they're playing solid defense and Graham Mertz is taking care of the football, and then there's a Wisconsin team when neither one of those things are happening. So you look at games like the one against Maryland's going to be tough because you know how Maryland likes to play offense. I'll challenge a defense, which was young at the beginning of the year, but now we're halfway through it. Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, those are the ones where you ask the question because none of those 3 teams have really been consistent this year. So for Wisconsin, I think it's not necessarily about the opponent. It's more so about what they do. Can they go out there and play great defense? And then can Graham Mertz take care of the football? He's thrown 1 interception in their wins this year. He's thrown 5 in all of their other games. You can't do that.
Yeah, I would say Maryland is the only team that Graham Mertz is going to probably, have to throw the ball a lot because of Maryland's going to score points. The rest of these games, they can keep him under wraps and they'll have a chance to win. Jim Leonard now will earn his money. He's going to have to motivate. He's going to have to say, hey, we got to get to a bowl game. So this is going to challenge him as a head coach. It'll be good for him.
Purdue win was really big for them.
Yes,
that was an enormous win. I mentioned the bowl streak on the line. They also have had 20 straight winning seasons, which is the second longest streak in the country. So a lot on the line here down the stretch for Wisconsin as they look to keep those streaks alive. Iowa's 4-4. It's pretty similar. 4 games left. They're all against the West. And I would say I look at it in much the same way I look at Wisconsin, where you say all these games are winnable, all these games are losable. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, and I just like I made reference to Wisconsin, Maryland, I would say Iowa, Purdue. They don't want to get into a shootout with Purdue. The rest of these games, they can slug it out with them and play defense and have a chance to win them all.
That's the thing that stands out to me is I look at this Iowa defense and I say that they're plenty good enough to go out there and get a win in all of these games. Can the offense generate some momentum based off of what they did last week and actually move the ball and put it in the end zone?
I'm going to bet on Kirk Ferentz, too, to get 2 wins. He's been there.
Yeah, and again, this is a program 9 straight years they have qualified for bowl games. There was one, remember, that was canceled due to COVID. But again, they tend to figure out a way to get it done. We'll see whether maybe just mentally the fact that they played well. I mean, they're obviously going to play much better defenses than they played last week. But just the fact that they proved to themselves amidst all of the negativity that you can get it done, maybe that somehow psychologically helps them a little bit here going forward. Rutgers feels to me like the longest shot of this group because they still have Michigan and Penn State on the schedule. So unless they were to pull a massive upset there, Wani, they'd have to win the other two.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, last week disappointed me. You know, the one thing that I thought they could do is stop the run,
right?
And they couldn't do it against Minnesota. It's going to be a challenge. Greg got his work cut out for him.
I just don't know if they have the offense. Like, I look at three of these teams up here, Michigan, Penn State, and Maryland, and say that they've got offenses that can put up some points, and I'm not sure Rutgers can match. That's the biggest question to me, is can Rutgers match the offense of some of the teams that they're going to see here at the end of the year?
I think when you're one of those teams that ends up at the end of the year with 4 or 5 wins, you look back on those what-if games, and they will look back on Nebraska as such a what-if game. Our big stat, Penn State and Maryland shared the conference field hockey title this year. The Nittany Lions getting the #1 seed by virtue of their head-to-head win, so they get the lone bye in the Big Ten tourney. As you can see, it was Penn State's 8th title all-time, a program led by the second longest tenured coach in the Big Ten in any sport, Shar Moret-Curtis. She joins us now for today's big interview. And Coach, congratulations on winning the conference title. How important is that bye for you and your program?
You know, I think sometimes it can be a double-edged sword because you want to start the tournament right away. You're so anxious to get involved with the competition. But at the same time, I think knowing that we have to travel a bit to get to Ohio State, it gives us an opportunity to rest and strategize a little bit more.
You're certainly playing well. You bring a lot of momentum into the tourney. 7 straight wins. Your last 2 games against Rutgers and Maryland, you outscored them by combined 8-2. Give me a sense of the state of your team heading into this tournament.
Well, obviously, we've really grown with our confidence the past couple weeks. I really am so impressed with this team because whatever we put at them week to week to just this is what we're going to look for tactically, they come out, practice, and really absorb it and then look to put it into the game. So I think just our growth throughout the season has been significant, and our defense has definitely stepped up the past couple weeks.
Shar, this league is so good. I mean, you look at that bracket for the Big Ten tourney, it very well could be the NCAA tourney bracket. You got 4 of the top 6 teams in the country, 5 of the top 10. This was the story last year as well. How does playing in such a competitive Big Ten prepare you for the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, we're so proud to be a part of this conference. Like, congratulations to Maryland as well for the year that they've had. And just, you cannot take any game for granted in this conference. And I think that's what makes us so prepared for the postseason, is that we know that we've gone through such a challenging schedule. We try to schedule a very challenging non-conference schedule earlier in the season. But we know once we get to Big Ten time, every game you got to bring your A game.
It's an exciting time for your program, not just because you're the #1 seed in the Big Ten tournament, but you also have a new facility that's under construction that will be ready to go next fall. What does that mean to this program?
You know, I think, first of all, I'd just like to thank all the donors and the alums and the fan base that have stepped up to make this a reality. They've been very generous to Penn State field hockey, so it's become a reality. It was a dream 12 years ago, and to think that we've been patient that long, and now that we have the construction going full speed ahead, you know, we're excited about what it's going to bring to our fan base, to our team, just the pride of Penn State. We draw exceptionally well. This year, without having stands, I think, average over 700 people at our games. So just the enthusiasm, and I think again, the pride base of Penn State really comes out and supports their teams.
I mentioned your 36th year at the helm of this program, and Penn State was always ahead of its time when it came to women's athletics. That being said, though, how have you seen the commitment level to women's athletics at Penn State even increase here in recent years?
Yeah, year after year, I always say that. You know, when Title IX was enacted in 1972, not too many teams their toes were held to the fire, but Penn State was one of the few programs that really stepped up and provided scholarship opportunities for their female athletes, myself being one of them. So grateful for that opportunity. And they just continue to build on that. You look at, our women's soccer team. It came in, I don't know how many years ago. We started a varsity program, and they've been extremely successful. Volleyball, softball, basketball, track and field. Like, I could just name every single one. Swimming and fencing. There are just so many. Lacrosse, sports that have really just, the trajectory is going up and up. And I think that's just credit to our administrators over the past and what we have, the energy that we have moving forward.
You mentioned Title IX, and your career really parallels Title IX. It's interesting, I spent some time with Carol Hutchins for a long-form feature we're doing for next year. I was with her last week, and it's a similar thing, right? The timing, the degree to which it coincided with Title IX, obviously the 50th anniversary. You started playing field hockey in the 7th grade growing up outside Philly. What was it that captured you with that sport?
You know, I grew up in a family of 7, 5 brothers. So the fact that this was a female sport, very unique to just the girls at the time, was something that I really, really embraced. I mean, I played basketball in the street with the guys and ice hockey and baseball, all those different sports. But to claim my own sport was something I think that was very special to me and to my friends. And I think just seeing this unique sport, the way it's grown in our country, around the world, like being a part of the Olympics and medaling in the Olympics in 1984, this sport is just, you know, you as a field hockey dad, it captures your soul. And I think people don't understand the rules sometimes, but it's such a fast-paced sport, and the skills that these girls have, it makes it a very exciting game to watch.
Yeah, I've been watching for 7 years, Shar, and I have to come clean and say I still, there's some whistles that blow. I'm still not 100% sure what's going on, but that's okay. You mentioned being an Olympian, and you had a really crazy experience with the Olympics because you were supposed to be on the Olympic team in 1980, and that, of course, was the Moscow Olympics that the United States boycotted. You ultimately got to go in 84, but you were such a great player at Penn State, a 3-time All-American, and this is kind of the culmination to get to go play in the Olympics. Take us back to 1980 and what it felt like to be a part of that boycott.
Yeah, it was devastating, and the reason it was because we had trained so hard, and field hockey really wasn't a part of any Olympics. So in 1978, Moscow decided they were going to add women's field hockey as their initial Olympic sport. So now we could dream of being Olympians. And so Vonnie Groh was our coach. We got together, and we were ranked 11th in the world. We knew that to qualify for the Olympics in 1980, we had to be in the top 5. We went to the World Cup in 1979 in Vancouver, and we finished 5th. So finishing 5th, we've actually finished 3rd. So we were in the top 5, so we knew we punched our ticket to go to the Olympics in Moscow. Both the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics were at the same year. We watched our men's ice hockey team defeat the Russians, and it was just so much, you know, patriotism throughout this country. And we thought, wow, this is going to be so exciting because that's going to be our opportunity come the summer. And then when there were just these little inklings, things being whispered around that we could boycott the Summer Olympics because of Russia invading Afghanistan, it was devastating to hear. And when it was finally announced that the United States would not be sending a team in April, it still gives me chills today. But fortunately, I was young enough, and I really continued my passion to play field hockey, so I was able to go to the Olympics in 1984, and I think winning that bronze medal really capped off, you know, a career with my teammates on the U.S. Olympic team. Just something that I'm just forever grateful, and it means a lot to me to share it with my teammates.
That Olympics was, of course, in Los Angeles, and I know in the Athletes Village you got to hang out with a fellow named Michael Jordan. Tell me a little bit about that friendship.
Yeah, well, Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing, all the guys, they were on our floor. I mean, there were just so many amazing athletes. Greg Louganis, Rowdy Gaines, Mark McGuire. They were, you know, in the Village. Everybody stayed in the dorm. And, you know, we shared a phone between 3 rooms, and Michael Jordan happened to share our phone. Well, our phone was ringing off the hook. I'm like, Michael, we're trying to get some rest here. We're trying to win some medals. You know, I know you're very popular with the ladies, but if we could tamper that a little bit. And, so it was quite the experience.
Well, you've had an amazing career, as we said. You've gotten to represent your alma mater now for so long as the head coach. What has that meant to you? I know Penn State means so much to you. What does it mean to be able to represent Penn State in such a visible and public way?
Yeah, it means so much to me in my heart. I'm grateful for the opportunity that they gave me coming out of a small high school in Delaware County that we called Delco. So having the opportunity to come here and play for Penn State. And then when I got the call for the job back in 1987, I was at Boston College. And it is a dream come true. And my longevity here is something that I will always cherish. I just am so grateful for the assistant coaches that I have this year, Laura Gephardt and Lisa Love, and all the players that have given so much to the program. And again, you take so much pride because Penn State just, it exudes pride. When we have our core values, we talk about, what's important to us. It's pride, it's respect, it's compete, and it's gratitude. And I think that living those core values every day matches the values of Penn State University. So I think getting a great education, being a successful student athlete is what's important to all of us here.
Shar, Penn State has never won a field hockey national championship. As you well know, you've come agonizing this to be the team that breaks through. What needs to happen here in the next month?
Yeah, Dave, agonizingly close is a great way to say it. We just take one game at a time. I think we're just always trying to grow game to game, week to week, and we really don't look ahead. It's a program where we recruit athletes to come here to win championships, and that's always our goal when we start the season and when we compete all year round. But I really think that there are so many quality teams this year in the country that you just need to really focus on yourself, and we hope that we can do that for Penn State. Winning the championship, the Big Ten championship, was amazing. I think the girls felt just the spirit of Penn State and the support from Penn State when they came back Friday night to Nittanyville, and the athletic director Pat Kraft and Lynn Holler were there, and all the fans to meet us. So it was a special moment that I know our players are going to remember the rest of their lives.
Shar Curtis, congratulations on all your success, not just with this team this year, but obviously just an amazing career at Penn State. Really looking forward to seeing what this postseason holds for the Nittany Lions. And thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Talking about that field hockey Big Ten tournament. It begins Thursday with 3 games, all on Big Ten Plus. Penn State will be joined by those 3 winners for the semis on Friday, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be